Well, if Vanderbilt makes marginal gains in 2025, there's no way they can't win 8 games. Let's get it. I'll tell you why. The show starts now.
You are Locked On Vandy, your daily podcast on the Vanderbilt Commodores, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome into the Locked On Vandy podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Corey Burton. Thanks for making Locked On Vandy part of your day. And shout out to all of you everydayers. And however you got here, thanks for making your way. As I did a stat dive from last season, I noticed that Vanderbilt finished near the bottom in just about every stat category. And that tells me that coaching, strategy, and execution of that strategy was stellar. So what happens if they improve those stats? Ooh, they could win 8 games for sure. And recruiting is still pressing forward. So what's the latest with Vanderbilt in recruiting? Also, baseball welcomes some commits from the portal to bolster their lineup. We're going to talk about all of that on today's show. Thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen each and every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube as a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's a pretty good deal. And speaking of pretty good deals, I think that it should be a pretty good deal that Vanderbilt was able to finish with 7 wins. And you look at the stats, you look at the different stat categories like scoring offense, total defense, scoring defense, total offense, all that stuff. Like you look at touchdowns, you look at a bunch of different things, and it's amazing when you really kind of look at where Vanderbilt finished in all of these stat categories. You look towards the bottom, and they are near the bottom in all of these past categories. And so before we kind of really get into some of the main categories, I think one of the things that this tells me, and this should be an absolute rave review on this coaching staff. This should tell you that this coaching staff is elite. This should tell you that this team is bought into the identity and the game plan and their plan of attack and all of the stuff that they want to do strategically to try to win games. This record versus these stats tell you that they were bought in completely. And this is, this is a gold star for Clark Lee and staff because they got the team to buy in and they executed it. And it's very, very impressive when you kind of really step back and think about it, because the 2 categories I felt like in their wins that they dominated was time of possession and the fact that they took care of the ball. So it tells you that football is a way more simple game than we think. You take care of the ball. They had a +9 turnover ratio, fewest turnovers in the country offensively, fewest giveaways, and they had enough of a number. They had 9 more takeaways than they did giveaways, which left them at a +9, which was, I think, tops in the country. So this is, like I said, this is really, really huge deal for Vanderbilt to be able to bolster that. So like I said, how did they do it? Well, they finished with the fewest turnovers and they controlled the clock, won the time of possession. That was their goal. Coming into the season, Vanderbilt was like, listen, if we're going to, and they also fed number 9 here, Eli Stowers. They fed him early and often, but they said coming into the season, and we knew this with the way the roster was constructed, with the way that they felt like they were going to have to win because their roster was not quite as complete as other teams. They were going to have to win the time of possession. They were going to have to control the ball, control the clock, control the field, and make teams earn it. And I think this is an example of statistics do not tell the whole story, because if you look at the SEC statistics, right, from 2024, Vanderbilt was 13th in scoring offense at 27.31 points per game. They scored 355 points total. They were 13th. Ole Miss was number 1, 38 points per game, followed by Tennessee, Alabama, Texas, and Georgia. Georgia, Texas, and Tennessee were playoff teams. Ole Miss and Alabama finished just off of that mark. In total defense, Vanderbilt was 14th in total defense. They would give up 376.5 yards per game. They finished just shy of Arkansas, so they could have finished 13th, maybe even 12th. With Texas A&M was real close there. Scoring defense, Vanderbilt was 13th in scoring defense. Total offensive plays, they were 14th, where they averaged, total offense, they averaged 318 yards per game in total offense. So they're 14th in total offense. Touchdowns, they were near the middle on that. They were, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12. They were 11th in touchdowns. They were 15th in total yards. They were 14th in average per play. They were also closer to the middle. They were probably 12th in special teams points. And then, like I said, total offense, they were dead last, 318 yards per game with 39 touchdowns. They were dead last in total offense. So what does this tell you? The stats don't tell the whole story, because how are you last? How are you not really above 14th in most of those major offensive categories, and you beat Alabama, right? You look at defense, rushing defense, they were 14th against the run, and they were 15th in pass defense efficiency. They were, I can't, I can't really fathom just how low they were in all these statistical categories, and they won 7 games. It's hard to wrap my head around that, because everyone's all like, well, stats tell the whole story. Stats tell the whole story. Stats tell the whole story. They were this, they were that. Vanderbilt sucks because they were this, right? But I think when people just throw numbers at you without any context, I really don't think those numbers mean anything without context. And the context is this: Vanderbilt held a psychological edge over their opponents. They controlled the clock, which caused teams to panic. They didn't give the ball away, which I think there's some teams that were hoping that they would fold and give the ball away. And they just never really beat themselves. They didn't wind the scoreboard. They didn't gain a ton of yards throughout the season. They weren't very explosive. They did what they needed to do in order to win the game. Defensively, bend, don't break. Kicking game, make enough big kicks, and then offensively, move the chains, control the clock, and put the pressure on the other team. And 7 of those games, the other team couldn't handle the pressure. The other 6, they just did. And it was, it's just like I said, it doesn't, to me, stats don't tell the whole story. They tell a big part of it. They tell you kind of where you're at, but they don't give you the context that you need. And that's what I'm here for. If you guys want to fill me with stats, by all means, throw stats at me. I will give you the context to each and every statistic, why they were this or why they were that, or what contributed to that, what contributed to each stat category. So the fact that they had 7 wins, and they were really every stat category I read, I think other than there was one where they were 11th. But for the most part, every other category I read, they were 14th or worse in the SEC as far as those stats go. And it points to me as hey, this is great coaching. This is great buy-in. This is great execution. And where are they going to go now? Okay. What does this mean for this year? Well, here's the thing. Here's what it means. When they did a stat dive, I'm sure they did the stat dive, self-scout, all that stuff, and they put together their recruiting plan. They had to figure out what is going to happen next year with these stats, with this roster. How are we progressing? How are we projecting? what's going to happen. So, like I said, stats don't tell the whole story. There's context to everything. And the context was this: few turnovers, one time of possession, held on to the ball, controlled the clock, controlled the field, and ultimately put insurmountable pressure on the opponent to make the plays. Teams like Alabama, Auburn, Kentucky, Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech, Alcorn State, Ball State, they could not. They folded. They couldn't handle the pressure. Missouri almost buckled. Georgia State should have buckled, but they didn't. Vanderbilt ended up buckling in that game, actually. But it's impressive, man. It really is. This shows that this is an elite execution of a game plan, elite execution of an identity, and this is something that Vanderbilt should build on moving forward, and I think that they will. And my prediction is this, and I'm going to tell you why. And I'm going to tell you how they're going to get there next. But they're going to win 8 games next year because I'll tell you that next. But first, I want to talk to you about FanDuel. Yeah, that's right. This NBA season is wrapping up as I record this, so can't bet on NBA, but MLB is raging on, and college football will start very, very soon. Summer sport is in full swing. You can probably bet on golf and racing in MLS, but there's a lot of high stakes stuff, Gold Cup, soccer, Club World Cup, all that stuff. But FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. If you already follow the action, why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach, or you could be sitting by poolside placing bets as you go. So I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups. I look at all the baseball games and kind of just hop in there in the 7th inning of a few that I feel good about. And, and the app always keeps it fresh with new daily promotions too. And there's always fun ways to bet. There's all kind of things you can do. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, makes the regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the 9th inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action. So are you new to FanDuel? Well, if you are, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. So open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen each and every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you need a second listen, Locked On SEC, go check them out. Chris Gordy, or check out the whole catalog of Locked On SEC shows. You start with Locked On Ole Miss, with Stephen Willis, Locked On Gators with Brandon Olson, Locked On Bulldogs with Clint Shamblin, Locked On Auburn, Zach Blackerby, and the list goes on. So this is kind of exciting for Vanderbilt, because when you really kind of put things big picture, and you look at some of these stats, because people like to throw out stats anytime they make an argument. Well, this guy's, he's hitting this during this time, Well, they don't win well on the road. They have an efficiency rating of blah, 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 blah on the road. Like whatever stats. Like, there's always these stat nerds, and they're throwing out the numbers, right? And I like stats, but I think they have their place. Stats tell a partial picture. And what's encouraging is that Vanderbilt has a lot of room to grow coming off a 7-6 season. A lot of room to grow means potential is there. I made my prediction right before break. We're going to win 8 games. I think it's possible, right? Even with this schedule right here. This is a hard schedule. But I think it's possible, because all they have to do is make marginal gains in all of these stat categories. If they could just get up to 10th in total offense, if they could get up to 10th, 8 through 11, really, in total offense or offensive scoring, if they can get up there in total defense, up in that range, if they can have mid-level rankings in these stat categories with their identity, and their philosophy, teams won't be able to handle it. Because if they're scoring at a higher clip and holding on to the ball, which means they're converting more of those drives. They didn't convert, especially I think the last 3 or 4 games kind of tanked those numbers a little bit because they could not finish drives. They could not sustain drives. Like they just kind of went into the tank because their roster broke down. But I think if they can cap off more of those drives with points, right? You cap off half of them with touchdowns and you get field goals on half of the remaining drives to get your numbers up into the mid categories. You start putting more points on the board, it's going to put a lot more pressure on those teams. You do an 8-minute drive and you punch 7 up there, and then you get a 3 and out, and you get the ball back and you do that again. Even if you get 3, that's 10 points and 16 minutes gone off the clock. Like that puts a lot of pressure. That's ultimately what crumbled Alabama. That's ultimately what crumbled Auburn. Auburn could not sustain drives. Kentucky could not sustain drives because they couldn't get in a rhythm, because Vanderbilt was holding the ball. Even when they punted, they just held the ball. They would get enough first downs. They would move the chains, and they did everything they needed to get by. Now, I think to improve, they've got to start converting a lot more of those drives into points. And I think if they can do that, they will win 8 games. It's an if-then, but if they convert half of their drives into points, I think they finish in the upper half of the. I think they can finish in the upper half of most of the categories, and I think if they can create a few more turnovers, if they can get off the field a little bit better on third down defensively, if they can improve those numbers even a little bit, and they can get ahead of some of these other teams, they can win 8 games, right? They can, they were close against Missouri. They can punch through and finish that against Missouri if they just finish if they finished 2 more drives in that game before overtime, that's a loss for Missouri. LSU, they just ran out of gas. But I think if they could have held the ball a little bit more, converted a little more points, they would have gotten it. Against Texas, they had a major lull in the second and third quarters. If they could have finished half of those drives with points, they probably beat Texas. Right? Tennessee, they run out of gas, but they get off to a 14-0 lead. If they could sustain that, if they could have kept that momentum going, which I think they will with a better roster, if they can get off to a start like that again, I think they have the roster to now finish that game. Alabama, if they execute that game plan again, play a little bit stingier defense, maybe get off the field twice on third down, and they score at the clip they scored, at the rate they scored against Alabama, they'll have no problem. South Carolina, that game was just bad, right? They just sputtered completely. So I think if they can improve some of those drives, they have a chance. Against Virginia Tech, I think that game doesn't get interesting if they score in the third quarter. I think that's a blowout if they score in the third quarter last year. But they just got to score more consistently, I think, to be able to get those games and to be able to get ahead of those games. So that is the key to all of their success, is to be able to do that, be able to score, be able to put points on the board, right? And you don't have to every single drive, but I think if you can do, I think of all the drives that they didn't score on last year, I think if they score, if they get points on half of those drives, and they can split it up, touchdowns and field goals, however they want. But I think if they can score on half of those drives, I think they win 8 games pretty easily this year. That's my prediction. That's how I'm gonna ride. All right. So marginal gains. That's it. That's all they need. Marginal gains, and I see no road where they don't win 8 games. Marginal gains. That's all they need. That is all they need. They're recruiting well. They have a roster built. They're doing well in the portal. They have great NIL potential. They have things in place. This team can be successful. Now they just need to go out and execute it. They have the roster to do so. They have the philosophy to do so. They have the continuity in the coaching staff to be able to do so. So why not do it? Anyway, recruiting. there's a few updates here. Vandy 247 reporting on a lot of these updates, and I'm telling you, with these recruiting updates, the staff from Vandy 247 is incredible. The old Vandy sports staff from the old Vandy Rivals staff came over, joined forces with Vandy 247. It's a freaking all-star lineup, man, honestly. And Robbie Weinstein does a phenomenal job of getting updates, and I appreciate him for this. But he's talking about some updates. He got some intel from some key commits and some key recruits that are highly sought after Vandy targets and probably looking to be Vanderbilt commits, right? Starting with Mitchell Smith, 3-star offensive lineman. They're competing with Alabama. And I think there's some kind of shake up there and it's going to depend on whether Bama gets, how their offensive line commit room shakes out. But, according to Robbie, he still considers Mitchell Smith coming to Vanderbilt. He still considers Vanderbilt the team to beat. To me, the opportunity is there for Mitchell Smith. I think if he goes to Bama, he might get lost in the shuffle. He will more than likely portal out, probably. I think his biggest path to playing time is actually coming to Vanderbilt. So, Mitchell Smith, if you're listening to this, come on over. Come on up to Vandy. You'll have a really good you'll have a really good chance. You'll have a really good path to playing. All right. Garrett Withington from Birmingham, Briar Road Christian. He's an edge guy. He is somebody that he's on the radar. He's got some visits scheduled, but he's going to be somebody that you want to keep an eye on. 6'5", 265-pound edge guy, kind of like a Corday Sidnor type player, where he can be versatile, but probably will put on 20 pounds and play as a 5 technique or a 4 technique. So just look for that. He's kind of a bigger body, but he's solid of an edge coming out of Birmingham. And then Owen Cable from CPA right down the road. He took his official visit to Alabama. Alabama's offered some other receivers. Maybe they don't consider Owen Cable an option there. Illinois could be in the mix for Owen, but honestly, it's Alabama's going to be tough to beat if Alabama gave him a committable offer. But honestly, his best opportunity is Vanderbilt. And I'm not just saying that because this is Locked On Vandy, but his best opportunity is Vanderbilt. He'll get his path to playing time is better here. He's hometown team, NIL potential is there. So we'll see. We'll see kind of by the end of this month. We should know kind of something on Cable there. A lot of people were worried about Darryl Campbell. His official visit to Syracuse, I think, raised a lot of eyebrows, but of course he's talented, and so a lot of people are going to be pushing for him. But I think he's going to be pretty strong. And Mason Lewis, the cornerback from Queens Creek, Arizona, Basha High School, he's down to Vandy or Cal. And with Caden Harris flipped over to Georgia, I think there's some opportunity there at the cornerback position. There's a void. Mason Lewis could fill that void. So stay tuned to that update. But there's a lot of guys coming down to the wire. I will break each of these prospects down as they commit. I'm not going to do a full breakdown for somebody for an Alabama commit or a Cal commit or whatever. Come here. You'll get the full scale, just like I've done for the other guys. But those are some recruiting updates that I've noticed. But it's going to be a fun recruiting season, and honestly, it's I'm digging it. But nonetheless, baseball. Speaking of baseball, they've got it on the commit action. I'll tell you what they got next. All right, wrapping up here. As the great Yogi Berra said, it got late early. But Locked On Vandy, at Locked On Vandy on all social media platforms. Make sure you like, subscribe, follow, all of that stuff if you want the latest perspectives on Vanderbilt athletics, especially football and basketball and baseball. Check it out right here. So Vandy boys, they had a few pieces, man. This is going to be I think a lot of people were worried about what Vanderbilt was going to do in the portal. I think a lot of the early inactivity was concerning for Vanderbilt fans. But I don't think Tim Corbin panicked. I don't think anybody else panicked, but it's I think some of that should be eased. They got a couple of commits, over the weekend. Logan Johnstone from Washington State, and they also got OVC Player of the Year, Mack Whitcomb. They both announced that they were coming. Mack Whitcomb is a OVC Player of the Year coming from Tennessee Tech, right down the road in Cookeville. He was the catcher. He hit 360 with a 1.134 on base percentage, 15 home runs as a sophomore. He hit 12 doubles and walked 36 times, so he's a great plate appearance. He is entering his age 20 season, which means he will be a candidate for Vanderbilt's primary designated hitter, while he and fellow Illinois native Colin Barzy share reps behind the plate. So you get two really good hitters. You can kind of mix them in the matchup, mix them in the lineup as you see fit. You can get proper rest for Barzy and proper rest for Whitcomb as they kind of shuffle the lineup around. So I'm really excited about that. Tennessee Tech finished 37-20, 18-9 in conference play. They beat, they actually played against each other earlier in the season. This is good. So he went to this kid went to Baylor school. So this kid is a Tennessee kid. So he should play for the premier baseball program in Tennessee. All right. So getting a catcher, getting a DH combo is going to be really good. One of the things Vanderbilt's offense needed was a lot of power. So there you go. The next is Logan Johnstone. He's an outfielder from Washington State. He is a lefty that hit 337 with just over 1,000 OPS. He went for 17 doubles. He had 9 homers, drove in 40 runs over the course of the season. He is their third transfer portal commit. He's a solid hitter, great defensive player. You look at those numbers, and if you need somebody that hits for power, I don't know that he's necessarily the guy, but I think in order to balance a lineup, again, I'm putting context behind these stats because these power numbers don't tell the whole story. While it says he didn't hit for power a lot, I think having somebody in the lineup that can hit, that can get on base, that can do some things, he can drive in some runs. He can get some extra base hits. He can become a body on the base pass for somebody like Colin Barzy or Braden Holcomb or Brody Johnston or even even our new catcher Mack Whitcomb, to drive in. And so he's playing for the Williamsport Crosscutters of the MLB Draft League. He's considering going to the MLB, but honestly, I don't think I'm not sure he's going to be happy with his draft position. So, he can't really go on that. But he's the third commit, and the other commit, I don't know if we talked about this other commit, but is a pitcher, and I'm really excited about that pitcher from Virginia, lefty, and that should be a lot of fun. So it's going to be a fun season. I think Vanderbilt's kind of starting to finally figure some things out. They get a new hitting coach. They hired Jason Esposito as the hitting coach. He comes over. He used to play at Vanderbilt, and he comes over from the Cleveland Guardians. He's the assistant hitting coach for the Cleveland Guardians organization, and he played 3 years under Tim Corbin and started a total of 193 games. He was a second-round draft pick in the early 2010s by the Orioles. And so he's somebody who knows Vanderbilt. He's somebody who knows the college hitting game, and he's somebody that's been around the big leagues for quite some time as a player and a coach. And he's been with a really good organization. I have a lot of respect for the Cleveland Guardians. They're always in the mix in postseason play. So the Cleveland Guardians are a quality organization. So I have no doubts that this guy knows Tim Corbin. He knows his style. Tim Corbin trusts him. I think these two will work well together. I'm really excited about this hire. I think it will get these bats going. I think their approach will be a little, if it were me, my expertise, which is not MLB expertise, but from what I noticed is when it seemed like they were more relaxed and they weren't thinking so much at the plate, they were hitting better. When they weren't trying to drive in runs, when they weren't trying to hit home runs, when they weren't it almost seemed like the less they tried, the better they hit. And so maybe Esposito can tap into that a little bit. Maybe he can get these guys on track hitting wise. I think they're just looking for more consistency and some more power. They certainly look to get that in the portal a little bit, and they certainly want to add some just pure contact hitters in there as well to kind of balance things and even things out. But anyway, well, that's all the fun we're going to have. Baseball got better. Football, their arrow's pointing up rapidly. And like I said, marginal gains is all they need to win more games and to have an even better season than last year. I think marginal gains, they win 8 regular season with a chance for 9. That's my prediction. I'm gonna end with that. But thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. However you got here, make sure you come back at Locked On Vandy on social media. If you like and subscribe, we'd love to have you back. And with that, anchor down. Have a great day.